Well, parents, this is your last chance. If there are any young children that need to go to Sunday school, now's the time. If there are any adults that want to leave now and go to Sunday school, it's a good time. So I'm going to lay out, I've got a very short period of time and I just want to be upfront. I'm not going to be able to unpack every question, every comment, every thought. I'm not going to be able to unpack everything. I really have dealt with this topic many times before. I actually used to talk to youth and have hour and a half long seminars on this topic with youth. So I've got a lot of material. I got 20 minutes. Okay, so I'm going to talk in two ways today. One, sex outside of marriage and sex within marriage. We're going to try and cover both those areas today and what we understand about sex. I also want to say that remember, as I said last week, we all fall short in some way. So this is a judgment-free zone, and what I'm going to hold up today is what I believe to be God's best intentions for our sex lives and for our sexuality. So I'm going to hold up God's best, realizing that sometimes we don't always live up to God's best. In fact, we know that many of us don't, and probably the majority of us do not. So there's no judgment here. What I want to do is, in a way, hold up God's best and encourage us to seek God's best intention. Does that make sense? So there's no judgment here. It's more lifting up what I hope that you will strive for, not looking back. We can't go back and change our past, but we can look forward and look for God's best in our future. So that's what we want to do today. So I do talk to my teenager daughters about this topic. And I remember, I usually, when they become teenagers, I have the talk, right? And I say to my teenage daughters, I think we need to talk. And they look at me, about what, Dad? And I will say, boys. And they're like, oh, no. And and we actually schedule a time to talk about it. And they are like, they're like, if it's a week away, they're like, oh my gosh, what's he going to say? What is he going to say? So, and I think there's a little bit of that going on in our church, It's like, what's he going to say? What's he going to say? And I think there are people, I even hear, you're about to roll your eyes back in your head, like, oh, man, But the church needs to talk about this. And so, church, we need to have a talk. Super Bowl Sunday. Now, we're not only going to see football today, we're going to see commercials. And one of the commercials that's been highly publicized is the Mercedes-Benz commercial. Have you heard about it? They have Kate Upton, a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. The teaser is she's going to wash a Mercedes-Benz CLA in slow motion. Now, I have this feeling that there's not going to be much said about a car in this commercial. Just a hunch. But you can actually go, it actually is a tease. It's not as bad as everybody's making it out to be. But it is. It's tying sex to the selling of a product, right? And so what I'm saying is we're living in a very highly sexualized culture is what I'm saying. Also, the other thing I learned just about the Super Bowl, which shocked me, was that in 2010 at the Miami Super Bowl, 10,000 prostitutes were brought to Miami, to the city of Miami, for human sex trafficking during the Super Bowl weekend. They expect that to be just as big a problem in New Orleans this year because it's a port city as well. And it's interesting because we're not talking, I want to be clear about this too, we're not talking about women from other countries. We're talking about U.S.-born citizen women. The average age of a girl entering into prostitution in the United States the average age is 13. So think about that, folks. And they're capitalizing on this male-oriented Super Bowl to bring about human sex trafficking, and it's a big problem in New Orleans, probably as we speak. And that's according to the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. So we need to think about it. We need to talk about this. We can't keep ignoring it and keeping it out there in the world and thinking, oh, we're only going to talk about it or watch it on TV or let TV teach us about this. I think the Bible has a much better message for us, a much healthier message for us, and I think a message that needs to be talked about in regards to our sexuality. And I also want to say it's a positive message. So the first thing I want to say is this is a positive thing, that sex is a good and sacred gift from God given to us. So it's a good thing. Because a lot of times, I've been guilty of this in talking to young people. It's always painted in, you take health class or whatever. And what do they teach you at health class? You'll get pregnant, sexually transmitted diseases, and all these kind of things to try and create fear, about it. Don't do it, and it's bad for you. And so wait until you find the person you love and let them have all that bad stuff, right? And so there's a kind of a message. So you get this message that it's negative and bad, and then the other message we get is that when you are married, it's boring, It's boring and routine, and so that's a confusing message. You're like, well, what do I do? Don't do it? Do I do it? Because I don't want to wait till I'm married if it's boring and routine. I want to, and so there's this challenge, these messages that we're getting, when the biblical message and what God said, even from the beginning, is that the sex is a good gift. But it's also a sacred gift from God. And so it's a good thing. And so we often get combined messages, and this is a message that is different than what I think we'll get from movies, TV, media, whatever, because they often portray sex as it's just physical. It's just sex is what you'll hear people say. It's just a physical thing, just a physical act. It's just human nature. The biblical perspective is that sees the person, that you and I as a whole person, body, mind, and spirit. And that intimacy, sexual intimacy, involves body, mind, and spirit, not just the body. Although we tend to think of it just as a body type of thing. Jesus actually had it right when he said in Matthew, in his Sermon on the Mount, he said, everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Notice that, think about, so he's saying not only is it happening, even if it isn't happening physically, he's saying it's happening here and it's happening here. Jesus made that connection. And I think Jesus rightly got that right, because if you really think about it, sex happens here. Sex happens between the ears. And it's not just a physical act. So, for example, they've studied the brain, the human brain, and done research, and they found that there are certain brain chemicals, hormones, that are released during sexual activity. And here are some of the chemicals and what they do. One of the chemicals is called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is a neurotransmitter that creates a bond. So when you're engaged in that activity, you're creating a bond with that person that you're engaged with that in. It's also the same chemical that is released when a mother breastfeeds her child. Oxytocin is released with the child and with the mother, and what does that do? That creates a parental bond. So there's a bond that gets created there. The other thing that happens is dopamine is released. Now, dopamine is a chemical reward. It's a reward type of chemical. It's also associated with addictive behaviors or cravings. So like when we crave chocolate, that's a dopamine factor that's kicking in. There's also norepinephrine, which is tied to adrenaline, which is about the rush, that adrenaline rush. And interestingly enough, it also raises our memory capacity. So when that's released, whatever's going on, whatever we're focused on, that gets seared into our memory, into long-term memory. Not short-term memory, but long-term memory. And so it creates memory capacity. And so that's happening as well. And then, of course, serotonin is released, which is the calm and the stress-free feelings that we get from serotonin. So to kind of illustrate this a little bit more clearly and just help us get our minds around this, that it's not just physical, I want to give an illustration. And we're going to use this white duct tape today, and this duct tape is you, okay? Imagine this piece of duct tape is you. And I got a little bit of you in my mouth. Okay. So this is you, and you meet this special someone who just happens to be purple. I don't know why I chose purple, but so you meet that special someone, and you're attracted to each other, and things are going along pretty well, and you think, oh, they're really nice, and I'm really nice, and I'm really attracted to this person, and lust starts to kick in, and all these other things, and these chemicals start to kick in, and so you say, hey, why not? We're two consenting adults, and so you bond with this person, right? And so you create that bond, and so that bond happens, and oxytocin is released, and dopamine is released, and serotonin and norepinephrine, and all those wonderful things are released. And so you create this bond. So, and everything's fine, and you may have this bond multiple times. I don't know how many times you're going to bond, but or over multiple days. I'm not going to go there. Okay. So, but like the Baltimore Colts, one day they leave town, and you're no longer, and you're no longer in relationship with them. And so, notice what happens. Who can see this in the front row? What happened to that? Do you notice what's on this tape now? It's purple, right? A part of them goes with you, and a part of you stays with them because you've created a bond with this person. So, but because they left town and moved away, you go to Green. You find Green more attractive now. Maybe it's Green Bay, I don't know. But they come to town. They get sold, they come to Baltimore. I don't know. So, but anyway, you get attracted, so you're hurt, you get over that, and then the next person comes along, and you find that this Green person, this Green is really someone. Maybe you went on eHarmony and found your soulmate. And so you find this party, this is the one. And so you're really attracted to them, so you decide to, again, bond with them. But you know what's happening? And all those things are released again and everything. But it's harder for this tape to bond now because there's still a little bit purple left in there. But you really work hard at it, and that happens. And then you break up with them because there's no commitment to that relationship, and then they go away. And what's on the tape? Green and purple, right? And this can just keep going. I could just keep repeating this analogy over and over and over again to say this. We got to keep in mind, this is not just physical. It is emotional intimacy, it is mental intimacy, and it is a good and sacred gift, and it's meant to be used and held as a sacred way and as a gift, and not, in a sense, abused or dealt with lightly, because this is, that impacts the next relationship is what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that we can't ever have that next relationship or can't be intimate. It just, I think it makes it harder to have that relationship. And there's some things that we bring into that next relationship that we have to wrestle with and deal with that may hinder our ability to experience the intimacy that God had called us for and intended for us. And God does want us to experience this intimate, sacred gift that God has given us in a great, healthy way. And so it's a good thing, but when we abuse it or when we misuse it, it's not always abusing it, but when we misuse it, we can find ourselves challenged with that. So here's the thing I want to say, and here I want to say, especially to young people, well, for all people, there's a famous piece of wisdom that we all know. Good things come to those who wait. Right, good things come to those who wait. And I think by waiting to the appropriate time, that is a good thing and can be a very good thing and a very healthy thing. I realize that by saying this, I am saying something very challenging. Because of our highly charged, sexually charged culture in society, one of the things that's happening is that young people are reaching sexual maturity at an earlier age today than they ever have before. So they're reaching sexual maturity at an early age. The other thing that's happening is that we're waiting to get married later in life. And so the average age of the person who gets married today is 27. So think about it. So from the age of 12 to the age of 27, that's 15 years. And when are we most sexually driven? Those years, right? So what I realize that what I'm saying is not easy, and and this is where I'd spend a lot more time talking about temptation and how to wait and giving some practical advice. I just don't have time to do that today, but I think you get the idea. Now, one thing I will share, that it is possible. It is possible. A lot of people will tell you, the culture will tell you, we have movies like 40-Year-Old Virgin, like, oh my gosh, that's some kind of miracle. So what I want to say is that I was in a ski shop. I was between semesters. It was my first year of graduate work, and I was picking up a little part-time work between semesters during the holiday and winter months. And I was in a ski shop, and business was slow, and so the guys were sitting around the ski shop. And because business was slow, guys started to chat, right? And I'm sorry, ladies, that I can't, I don't know what women talk about, but I can tell you what guys talk about. And of course, the topic of an all-guy conversation turned to sex. And and at this point in my life, I've been dating my wife for over a year. We're engaged. We're going to get married in August, and this is like, about January time frame. And the guys are sitting around talking. This one guy is talking about his new girlfriend and all, how finally, that they got together. They slept together. And he said, I'll never forget. He says, it took me a whole 2 months to convince her to go to bed with me. Like, this was a long time for him. Like, 2 months was a long time. I mean, he was like couldn't believe it took this long, because other girls he had dated didn't quite take that long, And so for this one, this was like a big deal for him. And so the guys are talking, and then, Matt's engaged, so let's ask him. And they turn to Matt, and they say, Matt, so how long before you and your fiance slept together? And I looked at him, and I said, we haven't. And they just about fell over. They were just like, and I will never forget it, for 20 minutes, he was like, you're kidding me. You're kidding me. He'd walk away, he'd come back, he'd shake his head, you're telling me the truth? He couldn't imagine, because what I'm saying is the world is saying to us, hey, have it all. Do what you want to do. It's just physical. It's just a thing. It's just the way, it's just nature. And so it's hard to imagine waiting, to make that wait, to wait that long. And so I'm glad I did wait at that point, that my wife and I, that we were together we were dating for 2 years, and we waited until we were married to consummate our marriage and to see that sacred and good gift as something that we wanted to give to one another. And that was a great thing to be able to do. And I'm glad that I did that. But I realize it's hard to wait. But the reason I think it's worth waiting is because I think sex is best experienced within a committed marriage relationship. It's that commitment that surrounds that relationship that lays a foundation, and hopefully, as we talked about last week, lays a foundation for agape love. Does that make sense? We need a foundation of agape love even in the area of our sexual lives. And so I think sex is best experienced within a marriage relationship. So I want to just take a few minutes and talk about sex within marriage. Because many of you are in that place, or been in that place, or may one day be in that place. And so I would say that men and women come at this topic a little bit differently within the marriage relationship. Mike, can you show them the example this morning? Yeah, if you can't see, you gotta come. There's the man on top, there's one switch. And the woman, well, I won't say any more. So here's the thing. Here's what Pastor Matt says about sex and marriage. You want to have great sex? Have a great relationship. That great sex comes from a great relationship, not the other way around. And so, I'll take applause there. Yeah, that's good. It's about the relationship. So here's the thing. Again, I can only speak from a guy's perspective, but you can't ignore your spouse all day long and then at 10:30 at night go to bed and flip the switch. It doesn't work that way. It's about, I would say that sex actually in marriage begins with the words that you speak to each other when you walk in the door. That's when the sexual relationship starts. It's about that connection. It's about intimacy. It's not just physical. It's about making an emotional connection. It's about making a mental connection. And all that helps in the bedroom, helps this to happen. And so that's the way, and that's what I'm saying. God designed us that way. God created us to enjoy this in relationship with a person and in a committed relationship with that person. So that's part of that. The other thing I want to say about this that I think we need to talk, and again, I don't have time to unpack all this, but just to simply say exclusivity is important. Exclusivity in this relationship in the bedroom is very important. And what I mean by exclusivity is not just other people, but I'm talking about other things that we bring into the sexual relationship. For example, for guys, pornography, magazines, DVDs, movies, those types of things. that is what we would call the erotic. If you remember last week, we talked about the different types of love. There's agape love, and there was eros, from where we get the word erotic. And so eros, or eroticism, is one place we can live out of, even within our marriage relationship. I want to say to that sometimes we trade agape for eros, or erotic. And so we neglect the agape side of love, and we don't bring agape into the bedroom. What we sometimes bring into the bedroom is the erotic, because the world is promoting the erotic. I've heard a lot about 50 Shades of Grey. Has you all heard it? I'm not going to ask who read it. Just you've heard about it? So I kind of debated. This is a real tough one for a pastor, because so here's my dilemma. How do I speak to something that I haven't read? So I went and I read some of it so I could speak to it. Does that make sense? Not because I wanted to read it, all right? So I read the first 3 chapters of 50 Shades of Grey because that's the free download I get on iBooks. So, and it was boring. Man, it's boring. It's totally written not for a guy. That's all I'm saying, not a guy thing. But it's written from a woman's perspective, obviously, and I just couldn't connect with that. So then I couldn't get to the good part, as they say. So I went online, and sure enough, tons of people have posted the contract online. I read the contract. I think that is another great example of the way the world is telling us to trade the erotic, trade agape for eros, to trade agape love for the erotic. Because that's all it is. See, when we live out of the erotic, you always got to do something more. You got to build it again. You got to keep topping it. It's always one-upmanship or one more that you got to go, keep taking it to another level when you're living out of that type of love in the bedroom. Whether it's pornography, whether it's reading like this, it's based out of the erotic rather than agape. And what I want to say is agape is so much better, is what I want to say. It is so much better. The difference to me is this. It's like going to 7-Eleven for some Twinkies. Now, I like Twinkies. They taste good, instant gratification, they're sweet, but I feel awful after I eat too many Twinkies, or I eat awful after I eat anything at 7-Eleven, to be honest. So, So think of that. That's the erotic. That's the instant gratification, all those sweet things. The instant gratification. But what we're trading is like a steak dinner at Ruth Chris. Much more satisfying, much more fulfilling, much better. But if you don't know there's a Ruth Chris steakhouse down the road, you're going to keep eating Twinkies. All right. Am I the only one that's sweating here or what? Whew. Man, when's communion? Let's get on with communion. So, are you with me? You hear what I'm saying? I want to say that stop eating Twinkies. In your marriage relationship, outside of your marriage relationship, whatever, God's got a steakhouse for us in agape love. All right, let's wrap it up. Paul put it this way in 1 Thessalonians 4, and we're going to end with this thought from Paul. Paul said that each one of you know how to control your own body in holiness and honor. Each one of you know how to control your own body in holiness and honor. Literally translate, let me read this again with a literal translation. Each one of you know how to control your own sex organs in holiness and honor. Paul is actually talking about that part of our body, a specific part of our body in that verse. And he's talking about holiness and honor. What Paul is elevating this to is he's saying it's not just about your relationship to other people, it's also about your relationship to God. And honoring God, as Christians, we're called to honor God with how we use our bodies. And when we do that, we're not only honoring God, we're also honoring other people And when I honor and I respect my body and I respect someone else's body and I treat that with honor and I treat God's sacred gift in them and in me with honor, I'm also honoring them. And I'm honoring the person I may one day marry if I'm not already married. And I'm also honoring the person that they may one day marry, even though they may not be married. Does that make sense? And so we're honoring God and we're honoring other people when we do this. What Paul is basically saying is, master your sexuality. Don't let your sexuality master you. Amen.